Every day I wake up more surprised at the fact that the Chamber of Secrets is widely considered to be the worst Harry Potter.
The one everyone hates.
But then I remind myself that those opinions are just subjective, whereas objectively speaking, the Chamber of Secrets is the best Harry Potter. Now I know that being ironically obnoxious when discussing films can bother people, so I'm going to just say that I'm joking, and refamiliarise everyone with my method of evaluating the Harry Potter films as laid out in Part 1 on the Philosopher's Stone, which you should watch because imagine watching Part 2 and not Part 1, that would just be insane. We should assess the quality of each Harry Potter film based on how well constructed the story is, plus how well the film expands upon and improves the overarching narrative of the Harry Potter franchise. So, starting with the internal plot, let's look at how this film constructs a mystery. Now, before I begin, I should explain why mysteries work so well for a Harry Potter story. You see, I've come to the conclusion that there are basically 4 ways to tell a story. Firstly, we have action. In this case, the plot largely relies on having people fight each other to achieve their objectives and defeat their opponents. This is very limited in the context of Harry Potter, since the characters are not credible as action heroes. Moreover, as pointed out in a good video essay, which I'll link below, the way magic works in Harry Potter does not make for compelling fight scenes. Finally, within Harry Potter, one side is very weak at the beginning, so it makes no sense for the weaker side to engage in a show of force. Secondly, we have movement. It's been said that The Lord of the Rings is just characters walking.
He is way off, loser. You ready for the 3rd movie?
Fucking A.
And that's kind of true. Our protagonists are here, and they need to be there, is a perfectly fine way of telling a story. However, it doesn't work in Harry Potter, since Harry Potter is confined almost entirely to one location. Thirdly, we have interpersonal conflict. This is how stories are told in the majority of non-fantasy films. But of course, any good film will include aspects of this.
Then I shall die as one of them.
However, if Harry Potter just relied on interpersonal conflict, it would be nothing more than a high school drama, and not one of the greatest children's fantasy adventure stories ever told. And then fourthly, we have mystery. Fourthly seems like a strange word, doesn't it? You see, mystery is when the film tells us that something bad is going to happen, and that there are antagonistic forces at work, but our protagonists need to investigate and use their wits to discover clues, and thus discover the plot as it unfolds. It's very clear that it is mystery that makes Harry Potter stories compelling to watch, and therefore it's worth looking at the setup for our mystery in the Chamber of Secrets. I suppose I should start by doing what I did in Part 1, asking what is this film about, and then showing how the title gives us the answer. This film is about the Chamber of Secrets. But unlike the first film, which shows us the Philosopher's Stone quite early on, this film doesn't show us the Chamber of Secrets until the climax. However, the film actually starts the mystery super early, 3 minutes in fact. Dobby appears in Harry Potter's room and informs him that he must not go to Hogwarts. So committed is he to keeping Harry from going to Hogwarts that he has intercepted Harry's mail, and when Harry refuses to heed Dobby's warning, Dobby frames Harry by making it seem as if he dropped a cake on Vernon's dinner guests. This is an interesting way of introducing tension, since Dobby is not an antagonistic character. He's quite entertaining and comedic, which makes the grave concern he has for Harry's life more impactful. We know nothing about the plot at this point, but we know that before Harry has even left his house, there are already machinations underway to kill him. And since Harry has been locked up by Vernon and prevented from going to Hogwarts, the Weasleys show up to rescue him, giving us a burst of excitement as the characters overcome this obstacle. They go to the Burrow and some non-plot stuff happens before Harry ends up in Nocturne Alley via a Floo powder mishap.
What did you say, dear?
Diagonally.
I must admit I was surprised at how little impact this scene had on the plot, mostly because I remembered the Chamber of Secrets PlayStation 2 game where Harry overhears Lucius Malfoy in the creepy paraphernalia shop. But in the film, he literally just goes there, does the Schwarzenegger handshake meme with a dead hand, and then leaves. It seems like he's in Zombie Alley or something because the crowd surround him like they want to tear him limb from limb and eat his organs, but fortunately Hagrid shows up. But have I mentioned yet how one of the enduring points of this first act is that somebody doesn't want Harry to go to Hogwarts? Because wouldn't you know it, They try to go through the wall, and they can't do it. It's a bit of a contrivance that everybody goes through first apart from Harry and Ron, and then they don't even wait for them. Also, these muggles would have seen them go through the wall if they had gone through, but none of that matters. Anyway, so they have a fun little scene where they're flying to school in the flying car, and it's kind of insane just how much this kid is in mortal danger, isn't it? And then, when they get to Hogwarts, the car crashes into the Whomping Willow. I'm not sure if that's because Dobby hexed it, but if so, then that doesn't seem like a good plan on Dobby's part. He's trying to protect Harry, right? Anyway, Harry recounts all the different complications he's faced in getting to Hogwarts so far.
So a house elf shows up in my bedroom. We can't get through the barrier to platform 9 3/4. We almost get killed by a tree. Clearly someone doesn't want me here this year.
And then on top of all this, there is the suggestion that he might be expelled. Notice how at this point, we've had so much fun, both of us together, while at the same time, the film has really effectively communicated the fact that shit is going to go down this year. We get the herbology lesson, which when I was first watching, I couldn't remember the relevance of. But then, of course, we find out that the mandrakes can cure petrification.
Mandrake, or mandragora, is used to return those who've been petrified to their original state,
which will become very relevant later. They remind you that Nearly Headless Nick exists because there's a sorely missing Death Day party, so they have to remind you he exists somehow before he gets got. Speaking of getting got, 45 minutes in and the plot happens hard. We find out that somebody is out to kill enemies of the air because the Chamber of Secrets is open, which is so delightfully ambiguous that you might even say it's conducive to an entertaining mystery. And you'd be right. Quite shortly after this, we get a pretty substantial explanation of what the Chamber of Secrets is. It's a secret location where a monster lives, which can be commanded by the heir to kill all those deemed unworthy to study at Hogwarts, as they are not pure bloods. Now, you might think this is a bad thing, because it sort of takes away the mystery. After all, part of the fun of the Philosopher's Stone is that we didn't even find out what it was until coming up on the 2-hour mark. However, actually, it's not a problem at all, because we still have 3 big questions. Who is the heir to Slytherin? Where is the Chamber of Secrets, since the school has allegedly been thoroughly searched? What is the monster that lurks within? Okay, so they have to answer these questions, while at the same time Harry has to deal with Dobby trying to get him to leave Hogwarts by hexing a bludger. Last time somebody hexed his broom, this time somebody hexed a bludger. What's next? A hex snitch? Harry should just stop playing Quidditch. While Harry is getting his bone growing back after what seemed like a relatively minor tumble, he meets Dobby. Remember in the last film how Hagrid was reluctant to provide information, which made it more entertaining to watch exposition?
I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that.
Well, the same is true of the way Dobby is handled in these scenes.
I shouldn't have said that.
He doesn't want to tell Harry this stuff, which makes us more invested in finding out what it is. Also, Dobby irons his hands because he's so upset about the prospect of hurting Harry. This is an interesting dynamic, because it shows just how serious the threat is against Harry. Dobby will self-mutilate as punishment for what he's doing to Harry, but he still does it because he feels so strongly that Harry should leave Hogwarts. Anyway, but aside from all that, first question, who is the heir? Hypothesis 1. Malfoy is the heir. So one of the things this film does really well is misdirection. There are different suspects who are investigated, and while this film isn't an Agatha Christie novel or anything, it's still entertaining to watch the gang investigate the suspects. And of course, Malfoy is suspect number 1. You see, Malfoy is the conduit through which we were originally introduced to wizard racism, when he calls Hermione a mudblood. This whole muggle phobia is set up earlier when Lucius Malfoy is making similar anti-muggle comments to the Weasleys. Because they're suspicious of Malfoy, they decide to make a polyjuice potion, so they can transform into Crabbe and Goyle. What follows is a pretty fun scene
I didn't know you could read.
where they are able to ascertain that Malfoy is not the heir. It's kind of mental how gun-ho Malfoy is about people being murdered, but you know, that's Nazism for you. Ron and Harry can barely keep themselves from bashing the fash. This film also has another area where Malfoy and Harry's rivalry can manifest, since Malfoy's father paid for him to be on the Quidditch team. Also, for some reason, all they need is a written note from Snape in order to steal Gryffindor's slot.
I, Professor Severus Snape, do hereby give the Slytherin team permission to practice today.
Which makes no sense to me because Snape is the head of Slytherin House. Surely to overturn another team's booking, you'd need permission from somebody more objective. Oh well, doesn't matter. That slug spell is gross. However, before the book is even closed on the Malfoy hypothesis, we have hypothesis number 2 emerge. Harry is the heir. So we need to talk about this scene, because if I had to pick one scene alone that shows why this is the best Harry Potter film, it would be this scene. Harry talks to this snake, and we find out that this is an incredibly rare ability for a wizard to possess. Now, we already know that Harry can talk to snakes. We saw him do it in the first film, and we just accepted it as evidence of his magical ability. Now this ability is reincorporated and has a major impact not only on the plot of this film, but on Harry as a person. People grow to be suspicious of Harry, and Harry comes to question himself. Given that he was speaking another language inadvertently, perhaps there's the possibility that he is unwittingly controlling the monster. Although this isn't actually suggested by any characters, it is a possibility that's there. He sees the Sorting Hat, and the Sorting Hat reaffirms that he would have done well in Slytherin, bringing us back to the suggestion that maybe Harry has a potential dark side. The suspicion reaches peak validity when the person whom Harry saved from the snake is petrified. Even though Harry was commanding the snake not to attack, it looked to many as if Harry was controlling the snake and threatening this guy.
But it sounded like you were egging the snake on or something.
Very suspicious. I do have one criticism of Dumbledore's office.
Sherbet lemon.
Surely this way literally anybody who gets to Dumbledore's office would know the password. So how often do they change it? I feel like I remember in the books it being once a year. So if you get taken to Dumbledore's office at the start of the year, you know the password for the rest of the year. However, what I really love about this scene is that it is a retroactive revelation. See, something I hate nowadays is that increasingly films want to present their mysteries up front. We have to know that this is special or this is unexplained, and therefore we already know that there's going to be some kind of reveal. And then of course you actually get the reveal, and it never quite satisfies you. However, a retroactive revelation is when something we didn't even consider important is revealed in hindsight to be very important. That's a lot better than telling us it is important up front. Anyway, Dumbledore never really doubts Harry, and the suggestion that Harry is the heir kind of goes away, since there isn't much investigation to be done when you are literally the suspect. Okay, so moving on, and we have hypothesis numero trio. Hagrid is the heir. Now, the first thing I should say is that I was super shocked by how late in the film Tom Riddle's diary shows up. In my memory of the film, Harry was speaking to Tom Riddle throughout. However, in reality, there is only one scene with the diary, and it's where Tom Riddle is able to give Harry a vision of the past. In this vision, we have clear evidence of somebody having been killed, followed by Tom Riddle confronting Hagrid and accusing him of possessing the monster responsible for the killings. Because of this accusation, Hagrid is expelled and has his wand taken away from him. They are discussing the possibility of it being Hagrid when Hagrid shows up, looking suspicious. Hagrid has previously looked suspicious when Harry inquired as to why he'd been in Knockturn Alley, and Hagrid's response had seemed a bit like he'd made it up on the spot.
Oh, I was looking for a flesh-eating slug repellent.
Later on, Hermione gets petrified, and Ron and Harry go to see Hagrid again. They make Hagrid seem very suspicious with his crossbow, and...
Oh, nothing. I was expecting... It doesn't matter.
In general, Hagrid just always seems like he's hiding something. The gang aren't there for long, though, before the Ministry of Magic crew show up and take Hagrid to Azkaban and remove Dumbledore from his position as headmaster. They do like removing Dumbledore from the school in the final act of these films, don't they? Anyway, Hagrid tells us somewhat cryptically that they'll find out what they need to know if they follow the spiders. Twice previously in the film, we've seen spiders fleeing the castle, so the prospect of following the spiders makes sense. They go into the Forbidden Forest and encounter Aragog, who tells them that he is not the monster in the Chamber of Secrets, but rather that this monster is an ancient creature which spiders fear. However, despite denying murdering a schoolgirl, he doesn't have much of a problem with other schoolchildren being murdered, although to be honest they are literally spiders. There is no such thing as a vegetarian spider, so fair enough. Anyway, the magic car comes to rescue them. I think this is because it was bewitched by Dobby to rescue them, but I'm not totally sure. Last time the bewitched car crashed them into a tree, so... Anyway, what we learn from that is that Hagrid isn't the heir. So now we're at a bit of an impasse regarding who is the heir that's releasing the monster, so we can at least work out what the monster is. It is quite fun watching Harry and Ron solve problems without Hermione, as it shows how much they need her. Incidentally, they are only able to identify the monster because when she was petrified, she had a piece of paper with all the details about the monster on it. Turns out it's a basilisk, which is a giant snake. I found it kind of disappointing that there isn't a scene of them deducing it must be a snake, based on the fact that only Harry can hear it. They also hypothesize it moves around via the pipes, and I have to say, how? The basilisk is fucking huge. The idea of a snake that can kill you by looking at you is scary enough. It doesn't really have to be huge, but how on earth does this snake move around the school via the pipes and appear to kill people? Shouldn't it only kill people in toilets and stuff? How does it get into hallways and slither off? It's confusing. So if you Google, how did the basilisk, then the autocomplete is, get out of the pipes. So here's what I found out. Firstly, in the books, it's possible that the snake is enormous lengthwise, but not as monstrous as it is in the film. Having said that, I'm reviewing the film, not the books, so the films are still on the hook for this. How it got out of the pipes is more interesting, with the suggestion being that perhaps Salazar Slytherin, who founded Hogwarts, since he was apparently able to build a secret chamber with a secret entrance, he could also have had secret ways in and out of the pipes at various points. Okay, so they work out what the monster itself is quite easily, and I'll admit quite disappointingly. However, the next question is where can they find the Chamber of Secrets, which is made more imperative as a question when Ginny is taken by the monster. The reveal to this mystery is handled quite well. We see when they're working on the Polyjuice potion that they are able to use the girls' bathroom because nobody else uses it, since Moaning Myrtle is so annoying. We have no reason to think much of this, since they need an empty space for their investigative shenanigans. And of course, ghosts are a dime a dozen in this school, so there's no suggestion that Myrtle's death would be interesting. Again, this is another example of the film not telling us there is a mystery, but simply presenting the clues that will later be used to reach the conclusion. Therefore, when it's revealed that the girls' bathroom is the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, and that this is why Myrtle died, it comes as a genuine surprise. I also think it's neat how the bathroom has snakes on it, and therefore can be opened with Parseltongue. My memory was that there was a bit where Harry couldn't open it initially, since he had to learn to visualize the stone snake as a real snake. In fact, I found the bit in the book. "Harry," said Ron, "say something. Something in Parseltongue." But Harry thought hard. The only times he'd ever managed to speak Parseltongue were when he'd been faced with a real snake. He stared hard at the tiny engraving, trying to imagine it was real. "Open up," he said. He looked at Ron, who shook his head. "English," he said. Harry looked back at the snake, willing himself to believe it was alive. If he moved his head, the candlelight made it look as though it were moving. "Open up," he said. Except that the words weren't what he heard. A strange hissing had escaped him, and at once the tap glowed with a brilliant white light and began to spin. Next second, the sink began to move. The sink, in fact, sank right out of sight, leaving a large pipe exposed, a pipe wide enough for a man to slide into. That would have been neat to see included, but whatever. And after some complications, Harry eventually makes it to the Chamber of Secrets and finds Ginny. However, it's revealed that she was the murderer all along. At this point, it's worth looking retroactively back at her in the film. It seems apparent in the beginning that she has the hots for Harry, and this justifies the camera frequently panning to her. However, there isn't much to suggest that she was up to anything. Nonetheless, she was the murderer and is in fact evil. Except, of course, she is in fact not evil. The real bad guy is Tom Riddle, Mr. Diary Man, who is fucking Voldemort. Didn't see that coming, did you? Turns out that this film is a stealth prequel, and this guy here is this guy here. It's kind of cool that this random dude gets the job of playing the young version of one of the greatest villains in the history of fantasy. And I didn't really see it coming. Now, having said this, I am a bit disappointed. I had a memory of Harry and Tom Riddle talking over several scenes, and was surprised to find out that he had the diary for only one scene before it was stolen. In my memory, Harry and Tom actually formed something like a friendship, which was then betrayed when Riddle revealed himself to be Voldemort. Instead, when Riddle appears, it isn't that shocking to find out he's the bad guy, since we already know that he is of unreliable character, having accused Hagrid of a crime that we know he didn't do. So we have a reason to distrust Riddle already. Nonetheless, the revelation that he is Voldemort is one of the greatest moments in fantasy adventure history in my humble submission. Anyway, so then, Harry defeats the snake. I'm not sure how he fell over here, but what's really important is that the Basilisk's whole thing is that it kills you by looking at you, and it loses its ability really early into the fight. Given all of that, it's a miracle it was able to fight for as long as it did. And that's it. That's the story. And I know what you're thinking. Why wasn't there any reference to Christmas during this whole film? Christmas just came and went without a single mention. It's not a true Harry Potter film if we don't get to see Hogwarts all covered in snow. With all of this in mind, I'm kind of shocked at how great the mystery is in this film. The danger is introduced early, the threat is made to feel very real throughout the film, and the mystery element means that our protagonist can consistently be active and looking for the next clue. As I said at the beginning of this review, a good Harry Potter film is a good mystery. and based on the quality of the unfolding mystery, I don't see how this film can get less than a 10 out of 10. I guess I should clarify for the record that when I rate a film's story a 10 out of 10, that isn't the same as me rating the film a 10 out of 10. A good story alone does not make the rating of a film, and if I were taking into account other factors, I'd probably give this film an 8 out of 10. But my intention with these reviews has always been to assess the quality of the story and nothing else. But there are two dimensions to a story. Yes, there's how the story works within the individual film's narrative, but we can't forget the equally pressing question. How well does this film contribute to the overarching story of the Harry Potter films? Much like the last film, this film has some great moments at Privet Drive. It builds on the first film, in fact, because they reveal they've given Harry Dudley's second bedroom.
Even let you have Dudley's second bedroom purely out of the goodness of our hearts.
Meaning that the whole time he lived under the stairs, Dudley had 2 rooms to himself. Hilarious. And the fact that they are such awful people means we get to enjoy watching them fail. In contrast to Privet Drive, we get introduced to the Burrow and Ron's family. It sort of helps to know that there are places outside of Hogwarts that aren't abusive. And speaking of nice things introduced, we have Harry's relationship with Ginny hinted at, and their relationship between Ron and Hermione, where there's a bit of an awkward physical moment between them. How quaint. We get introduced to the various institutions of the wizarding world, such as the Ministry of Magic.
Dad works in the Ministry of Magic, in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office.
And Azkaban Prison.
Take me where? Not Azkaban Prison.
I'm sure that won't come up later. And we're told about the founders of Hogwarts and their differing philosophies. Moreover, we're told the motives of our opponents. They are literal Nazis. For at least 1,000 years, there have been wizards who believe that only purebloods should be allowed to study magic, and Voldemort is just a particularly powerful wizard of that inclination. It's kind of crazy how evil these people are. Lucius Malfoy is straight up going to murder Harry, and he is actively serving Voldemort by sneaking the diary into the school. And we get a repetition of the big concern from last year. Voldemort is still out there, and he is trying to come back.
As poor Ginny grows weaker, I grow stronger.
We now also know he has sympathisers in high places, and there isn't much that can be done against them. This is interesting, and I don't know about you, but this film left me wanting to see more. For now, Voldemort has been defeated, but he's tried to come back twice now. And finally, this film excels with one of the series' most dynamic elements, the curious connection between Harry and Voldemort. In this case demonstrated by the fact that Harry is a Parselmouth, just like Voldemort and Salazar Slytherin. It's clearly an ability associated with darker wizards, and Harry possesses it. Dumbledore posits that this is because Harry absorbed some of Voldemort's powers when he defeated him as a baby. If this is the case, one can't help but wonder what else Harry absorbed. Now, I will admit that I think the opportunity to have Harry talk with our main antagonist without even knowing who he is would have been a great opportunity for exploring this dynamic further. I can't deny I'd have loved to see several scenes of Harry communicating with Riddle through the diary. Nonetheless, I think it was great to see such an evil person as a teenager, especially when you contrast this with how we saw him at the end of Philosopher's Stone. There's a message there about what being evil will do to you. And with that in mind, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10 for contribution to the overarching story, plus for the way this film explains the motivation for the evil wizards beyond them just being evil. I mean, racism is evil, but it's a very believable evil given the entirety of human history. Now, is it maybe a bit silly for me to give this film a 10 out of 10 and call it perfect world building, even though I had a criticism of it? Maybe, but my criticism is basically that it introduced an awesome concept and didn't do enough with it. I wouldn't even have that criticism if they hadn't introduced the awesome concept in the first place, so I'm not going to hold that against them. Now finally, bonus round. This film is hilarious. Like, if you still think this film is the worst film in the series, you are wrong. Not only are you wrong, but if you watched this film and considered it the worst in the series, you have no soul, because this film is a blast. Mrs. Weasley is just perfect, both times that she gets angry. Mr. Weasley is perfect with his response to the boys being in trouble.
How'd it go?
Even if this is a bit of a gender stereotypical dynamic. And if we're talking about people being funny, we have to talk about Lockhart. The Pixie scene, making Harry answer his fan mail in detention, having a fucking painting of himself painting a painting of himself, removing Harry's bones, getting wrecked by Snape, and of course, losing his memory and all the hilarity that comes with that.
Who are you?
Ron Weasley.
Really? And, who am I?
I enjoyed the twist that he was just making up his escapades and wiping the memories of the wizards from whom he stole his stories. They don't pretend he's anything other than incompetent, Also, they do endear us to him somewhat by having him wish good luck to Harry.
Good luck, Potter.
But mostly he's just a big injection of fun in a film that really wasn't lacking a sense of fun to begin with. And if you're going to say that this film is bad because the humour is childish and you're a big boy/girl that watches dark, gritty films, then let me just say, wow, you are really, really cool. Anyway, like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, and constructive criticism is always welcome below. Although if it's about my microphone, then that's actually kind of your fault, because you can't really expect me to get a better microphone until I have at least 500 subscribers. Unless I do have 500 subscribers right now, because I'm recording this slightly in advance, in which case, wow guys. Otherwise, yeah, make an effort and follow me on Twitter. What's next? A hex snitch. What's next? A hex snitch? That's a hard word to say.